They call me Heretic, and for once, the name fits. I saved a kingdom and lost the right to live in it. I tore the mask from a saint and found a demon underneath. I kept my father's charge, tolerate no injustice, stray not from the true path. And for that, history struck my name from its own tongue. If you came seeking a hero's wreath, you will not find it here. If you came for truth, sit close. The wind runs cold along these hills, and truth is easier to hear when the fire is near at hand. Here is what you need to know. I am the man the church named a stain, and I am the reason there is still a dawn to wake to in Ivalice. I broke my oath to keep it. I severed kin to keep it. I chose to be forgotten because the price of being remembered was the truth itself. That is the shape of my transformation. That is the scar beneath every other scar. And if you think that sounds grand, you have never watched snow gather on your friend's lashes while your brother calls his sister's breath a necessary expense. Let's begin at the beginning, not of wars, but of names. I was born Ramza, third son of House Beoulve, in a castle whose stones remember more oaths than any man can keep. My father, Barbaneth, was called Knight Gallant. He taught with the ease of a man who had survived his own lessons. "Tolerate no injustice," he would say, and the sentence carried the weight of saddle leather and rain on iron. He was stern, but he never confused cruelty with strength. From him I learned that honor was a verb before it was a banner. Daisadarg and Zalbag were the elder pillars of our house. Daisadarg with a mind like a ledger, cold sums and ruthless balances, and Zalbag with soldier's bones, straight as a lance and satisfied to be one. I was neither. Perhaps it was my mother's blood, common, whispered like an apology at court, that left me less certain of the ladder everyone else ascended by birth. Perhaps it was only the mercy of being youngest, which allowed questions to grow in the shadow of expectation. Delita came to us then. The plague cut down his mother and father and left 2 children with eyes too old for their faces. We were boys together, and it mattered nothing to us that one of us owned a stable and the other shoveled it. We learned to whistle with grass blades on Mandalia Plain, learned to split a loaf evenly even when hunger argued for greed. Alma, my sister, braided Tietra's hair as if it were her own. Those were good days. I mention them so you know what was broken. The Garelin Military Academy polished lads into officers. It taught the proper forms of command and the cleaner names for killing. I wore that polish gladly. We Beoulves know our way around a battlefield. I told Delita once in the reckless pride of first marches, and I wince yet at the sound of it. Pride is a bridle. It feels like governance until you see whose hand holds the rein. Our first work was against the Corpse Brigade. Veterans of the 50 Years' War discarded like cracked shields. Bruges gives its bread to fresh appetite. Spent soldiers had no such charity. We rode out in good order, expecting bandits. We found men who had given their youth to the crown and received starvation as thanks. Argath Thedalphus came with us, a little lordling with a tongue honed to sneer. To him suffering was the due of common birth, and mercy was a coin best saved for one's own. I had heard such things before in castle corridors and at wine tables. In Argath's mouth they were not philosophy, only malice with mother-of-pearl buttons. Maluda showed me the crack in my father's commandments, not in their truth, but in the way they were used. She stood ragged in Dorder's wind, eyes bright as steel, and told me, "You call us thieves, but it is you who steal from us the right to live. It is an easy thing to win an exchange with a sword. It is a hard thing to answer a sentence that sharp. Every catechism I knew felt suddenly like a door I could not open, because the key had been forged for another lock. Ziekden was snow and the smell of powder, a white silence shredded by orders. Titra stood on the wrong side of the calculus. Zalbog gave it numbers. An acceptable loss, said the ledger that had once been my brother's voice. Argath put the sum into action. The bolt found its mark. A scream is a strange thing in snow. So small, so absolute. Delita knelt and gathered what the world had made of his sister and looked up at me with eyes I did not know. There are lines one crosses without knowing it until the ground has changed underfoot. Ziekden was such a line. My name became a weight I could not carry where I needed to go. So I set it down. I was Ramza still, but not Beoulve. I cut the ring from my glove, left it in a drawer, and took company with mercenaries whose loyalties were written in coin. Gafgarian's laughter had iron in it. His blade had prices. I learned from him that soldiers have more than one master, and the least of them are the uniforms they wear. We were hired to rescue Princess Ovalia from Orbon's quiet stone. There is a particular cold that lives in monastery corridors, old paper, the breath of the devout, and the close air of secrets. I tasted that air and did not yet know its flavor. Agrias was there, a knight whose oath and heart kept the same pace. Ovalia clung to dignity like a drowning woman to a spar. We fought among the stacks when the quiet broke into purpose. In the scramble that followed, Gafgarian showed me what our contract truly bought. He meant to sell the princess to whichever lion's banner paid dearer. Agrias set herself between price and personhood, and I, still hating the echo of Zekden in my blood, sold my last coin of noble expectation and bought a different kind of debt. Gafgarian and I parted steel to steel at Zirakile's falls, spray cold as confession on my face. When he went down into the fury below, I learned a thing my father had not lived to say outright. Sometimes loyalty to what is right makes you faithless to what raised you. That day I was faithless to my house and I did not repent. The night has turned its ear. Somewhere beyond the dark, I can hear a chocobo give a soft, questioning croon. The stars stand in their old places. The same patterns that men mistaken for prophecy still name after beasts and virtues. I could name them all once. Mustadio knows the new ones, the wheels and springs that live inside the world. He and his father pulled a stone from the bones of Goog, a clean, singing thing that warmed the hand like a heartbeat. The church wanted it like a starving man wants bread. Priests sent men with velvet gloves over knuckles of iron. We ran and fought and bled and learned that relic and reliquary were not the same word. Simon, good librarian of Orban, coughed the dust of too many years and too much truth and gave me a book that never stood on any altar. The Germanic scriptures did not sing. They scraped. Saint Ajora's miracles flickered like candle tricks under an open window. In their place stood a man who sold secrets and wore piety like a borrowed cloak. The holy story I had been fed since a child fell apart in my hands, and beneath it, like maggots under a fair loaf, another story writhed, older, hungrier, patient as winter. You may ask, was the church a lie entire? Number. Lies fatten on a frame of truth. A people need a story to rise to, even if thieves live behind its words. The bells still call men to mercy, and sometimes mercy comes. But the bells also drown out questions, and that is a use demons know how to make of any music. Demons, and I will speak that word by firelight, not as superstition but as fact. The stones, the auracite, are not wicked in themselves. They are doors. The world is not only the world. There is a pressure behind it like water against a hull. Where grief finds no shore, where ambition burns without air, where despair cannot breathe, something offers a bargain. The Knights Templar kept those bargains as if they were sacraments. The High Confessor smiled like a grandfather and counted souls like coin. The War of the Lions gave him ledgers full of blood. Cardinals should not swell like rotting fruit, but I saw it. A good man gone sour by a promise he thought he could master. In Lionel's shadowed hall, the flesh buckled, and what spoke with his mouth was not a man. We cut it down, Agrias and I, and others who had learned to one another instead of to rank, and the stone rolled on, shining its indifferent shine, as if we had only washed a window. Let me feed the fire, it's dying. The old trick of soldiers on watch. Keep your hands busy and your mind will follow. The mind wanders if you let it, and my mind is a loyal dog. It will return, but sometimes with carrion. Delita, if you came hoping for a simple villain in my friend's shape, you will be disappointed. He was what pain and clarity made of him. We looked at the same corpse and learned different lessons. I could not abide the machine. He would become it and turn its gears by his own will. When first he cut the strings of the men who thought themselves his masters, I felt a fierce pride holler through my hurt. Clever boy, I thought, strike the hand that holds the puppet's bar. But cleverness, left to run without a bridle, will make you a god in your own eyes. He saved Ophelia and caged her with the same motion. Love that cannot share its power will hold a knife like any other grasping thing. I have not told you of Zalbog and Dysadarg, and perhaps I do not wish to. We are taught that blood binds. That belief can make you hesitate when you should cut. My brothers were boys once, and I remember them that way on nights when the wind is gentle. But men are the sum of their choices, not their childhoods. Dysadarg kept ledgers not just for armies, but for souls. He marked me down as expense and would have reconciled the account with my death. He touched a stone and became a name no mother would whisper to calm a child. Zalbog, even honorable men can be bent into tools by systems older than their virtue. He took a path that had no room for questions and found himself at the end of it with his hands black to the wrist. I did what I had to. Do not ask me to gild it. My hand strays to the bronze cog. I turn it with my thumb and first finger. It spins, and sometimes I think I hear Gog in it. Down below the city's cobbles, among machines that dream of being gods, but wake only to rust. Mustadio taught me to listen for the catch in a mechanism's breath, the moment where a little pressure will save a great break. Wars are machines. They devour the very men who feed them. The War of the Lions was born of a dead king and an infant heir, of a white lion and a black, and of houses that believed banners bore right. That is the story they will keep telling. But behind it, the true machine ticked. Class ground on class, faith ground on fear, and the stones ground on hearts too tired to refuse. There were mercies along the road, lest you think the world bereft of them. Agrias, faithful as dawn. Alma, who kept my name when I had no use for it, and kept her own soul when others would have worn it as a mask. Sidolphus Orlando, whose sword was as honest as his eyes. He taught me that a legend properly carried can be light instead of burden. Olandurai, quick-witted and quicker-hearted, who saw more than most and paid for seeing. Meliadul, who turned her sorrow into a blade aimed properly, and not into a noose hung from her own neck. Even among priests I found men who were better than their vestments, and among brigands men who would share their last crust. I say their names by firelight because names deserve witnesses. Rising complexity, you would call the next bend in the tale if you were a scholar with a quill and parchment to organize what life refuses to. To a soldier, it is only the point where paths you thought ran separate cross under sudden storm, and you find yourself fighting 3 battles with one breath. The church moved in shadow, and the nobles in sunlight, and both cast the same cold on the fields where peasants reaped hunger. The stones sang without words in the hands of men who had once had names like yours and mine, and now answered to things that had watched the first night break over the first sea. I learned to read maps the way a carpenter reads wood grain, where it will split if struck, where it will hold if supported. I walked from Dorder's alleys to Lasalia's polished floors, from Sweegi's damp to Fovoham's dry wind, and everywhere I saw the same pattern of use. Those who could write the story did, and those whose blood inked the margins were told it was holy. Gaug gave me a glimpse of a world older than saints, engines sleeping like dragons, and men like Mustadio who could coax a little fire from their throats. Lionel gave me the smell of corruption under incense. Limberry showed me what a dead man's grace looks like, the Marquis moving with the elegance of a dancer and the hunger of a grave. And Riovanni's? No, not yet. Let me come to that in its proper time, as a man walks to the gallows with a steady step. If you are unacquainted with war's paperwork, understand this. Every atrocity has a letter of safe conduct tucked somewhere in a satchel. The church wrote many such letters, and the seal on them was a picture of a saint who had never been what the wax said. High Confessor Marcel Funebry, remember that name, only to forget the face. He believed himself the necessary evil that would shepherd men to a better order. Necessary evils grow fond of themselves and soon forget the word after the first. "Ramza, what do you believe?" an inquisitor asked me once, expecting a catechism he could box and break. "What is important," I said, weary to the bone, "is how you live your life." He wrote that down as if it were a riddle. It was not. It was only the shape of a man who had lost interest in arguments that did not touch bread, blood, or breath. Gaug's stone opened a dozen doors. Some I wish had stayed shut. The orosite answered to the hand that held it. In a pure grasp, it could heal. Marak rose when all reckoning said he should not. And in a corrupted one, it made monsters of men who were already halfway there. Vigraf was not half a man. He was a whole one broken by a world that gives revolutions grief and courts patience. He hated what deserved hating and loved what deserved saving, and could not see a road to either that did not run through power, offered in a dark hour. I met him on the stones of Ivalice like a confession no priest could hear. The duel was clean and hard, the way a duel should be when both men have reasons instead of excuses. When he fell back, the stone in his hand answered the place where grief had burned a room within him. The air thickened. The outline of him blurred as if the world had forgotten which lines belonged to flesh and which to thought. When it cleared, a thing stood where my enemy had been, horned, immense, speaking with his voice as a man might speak through a doorway into a storm cellar buried deep beneath his own house. We killed it, because there was no other thing to do. I do not call that victory. I call it triage. The fire has burned down to coals that look like cities seen from high places at night, glowing grids, quiet and alive. I draw them a little closer, not for warmth now, but because words like the ones that follow sit better in red light than gold. Riavans took from me the last of my illusions about what justice can purchase. It was a nest of ambitions braided tight. Argath's ghost in every narrow smile, noble houses with their pet truths, and the church's shadow moving behind tapestries like a draft you do not feel until the candle dies. It is the place where I understood that saving the world and setting it right are two labors that do not share the same tools. It is also the place where I learned how far I would go for Alma. If you judge me harshly for what I did there and after, judge me by this. I chose lives over legacies, and mine least of all. The kettle's low chatter tells me the night is further along than I thought. Campfires are clocks for men who no longer keep court appointments. You have listened with patience, and I have spoken as straight as I know how. There are more turns in this road. The holy island where confession means drowning truth instead of sin. The graveyard where airships sleep and a thing older than empires tried to wake in my sister's bones. Delita's crown and Ovelia's knife and the way silence sounds in a throne room at dusk. But we have reached the place a tale should pause. A ridge before the plunge, a breath before the blade sings. Take this with you to your blanket and your dreams. The war you have been taught to name began over a throne and ended nowhere near it. The lion's banners were a curtain. Behind it, old hunger arranged men like counters and called it providence. In the morning, if you still have a taste for ash and iron, I will tell you what I saw when faith took off its mask and showed the face that had waited beneath it for 1,200 years. I will tell you what a man becomes when he offers his sorrow as a doorway. I will tell you how I kept my father's words and lost everything they were supposed to win. The holy men of Murand keep their island like a closed fist. The sea around it tastes of iron and old vows, and the gulls there cry like penitents. We went because the air in Ivalice had grown thin with lies, and that is where the lies roosted thickest. The church called for peace with one hand and stacked kindling with the other. They preached order and fed chaos, and they were almost ready to show the shape beneath their vestments. We did not approach as a company in bright mail. We came like men come to awake, quiet, knowing there will be nothing new to say, only the old words that must be said again. Agrias walked at my side, her jaw set the way it gets when duty and doubt strain the same rope. Mustadio kept a palm on his satchel, where his art slept in little brass mouths and springs. Olan met us in the shadows beyond the quay, eyes reflecting a tired kind of hope. It is a rare comfort to find your own thoughts in another's face. They had Ovilia's name on their tongues there. Murand is made of steps, stone up from sea, then more stone up from stone, until at last the bell halls ring over an ocean of prayer. The High Confessor greeted us with the generosity of a spider who has noticed a fly and wishes to be polite. I had seen his smile before on mercenary captains and moneylenders. It is the look of a man who weighs you as if you were a parcel. "Reconciliation," he said, and the word dripped sweet as rotten fruit. He spoke of ending the lion's quarrel, of healing, of God's will. I listened and counted exits. It is a simple trick, learned on campaign. Let liars talk. The longer they speak, the more the truth stripes through the paint. He called me heretic in the tone of a man commending a hound he means to drown. Soft, persuasive, already decided. When we left his hall, Olan touched my sleeve and breathed his truth in 3 words. They have Alma. I have been cold to the marrow and hot enough to blister inside my mouth. Only once have I felt both together. That was the moment. The world narrowed to a girl's ribbon folded in a satchel. Breath went thin and sharp. Every choice became a door to the same room. "Then we go," I said. And we did. You must understand the pace that takes you when time becomes a knife. We moved not like men crossing a map, but like blood crossing a wound. In Lionel, a cardinal whose sermon smelled of wine had already bartered his soul. He swelled into a thing that looked like a priest's hatred wearing a man for a cassock. We cut him open and found a stone, humming as if pleased with its own trickery. In Limberry, the Marquis moved like a dancer in a dream, and the women at his side smiled with teeth that did not care who counted them. The dead obeyed him as if he were a sweet song they remembered from childhood. We gave him back to the grave with the help of steel and a will fierce enough to shame despair. The stone we took from his fall burned cold in the hand. Meliadul came to kill me. She wore grief like new armor, stiff and unyielding, and she had a father's name nailed to her heart. "Blasphemer," she said, and allowed the word no room to breathe. She was what I had been once, a faithful blade swinging at the shape of a lie and calling it duty. It took more courage to let her strike and not return it than to end the fight in a blink. I put down my sword and spoke the one thing we could share. "Look closer." That is all most of us need to do, and all we fear most. She looked. She saw. And then, because she was her father's daughter in the right way, she turned and walked where the truth pointed, even though it led her through her own blood. I count that among my few clean victories. We found Zalbag and Igros when the house I had dropped behind me tried to step into my path. He had a soldier's honesty and a general's blindness, and by the time either could save him, Dykedarg had already written the last figures on the slate. Poison is the coward's tutor. It tells smart men they need not choose in daylight what their hearts avoid in dark. Dykedarg had taken more than poison. He had taken a stone into his secret hunger. It changed him as much as he thought it would please him. I saw my brother wear a beast's name and thought of a boy drilling in the yard until his palms bled to make our father proud. We kill what we must. We live with what we cannot mend. Delita worked his own ledger in those days with the same quiet panic I felt, though his hands were clean of it. He pulled Sidolphus Orlando from the jaws of a staged execution with the ease of a man changing a glove and set him on my road the way a chess player slides a rook into a new file. Sid joined us not as a piece, but as a man, and the board changed, though Delita always preferred to think of men as pieces. He gathered allies, married Ovilia like a man straps on a sword, and made of love another lever. He sent word now and again, a caution here, a barrier there, a door left unlatched. We helped each other as men in a flood help from opposite banks. Not out of kindness, but because each sees the other's effort lowers the water. We pressed on because the stones pressed back. Vormov, Tingle, Tingilla, I have heard it 2 ways. Take the one that sits better on your tongue, war command like a skin, and something older wore him. He was patient, and patient men are the most dangerous because they can wait until you have convinced yourself there is no trap at all. He wanted Alma for what lived in her like a cup waiting to be filled. He said as much without ever letting the words leave his lips. Some plans can be read in a man the way a coastline can be read from the smell of salt. Murand again, this time in its true voice. We came like thieves and were met like plague. The clergy made piety of pursuit and sent the Templar out in ranks. We answered with our own kind of faith, that men and women who had suffered together could cut through anything made of lies. Meliadul's blade sang her father's shame. Agrias moved like daylight. Mustadio's tools spat thunder in polite little bursts that put honest fear into men who had believed God was theirs alone to aim. Stones answered stones. Between them, a girl's breath rose and fell, and that, more than justice, more than honor, was the measure. You have not seen the sanctum of Ultima as I saw it, a place beneath places, full of the breath of the dead and the dreams of men who wanted to be gods. The air there tastes of rain that never fell. The walls remember prayers that were really bargains. I went down those steps knowing I had already spent more than a man can earn in one life. Alma was there. She smiled at me the way she used to when she stole bread from the kitchen and hid half for later. "Brother," she said, and gave the word all its letters. Behind her, something old shifted in its sleep. The High Seraph is not a woman, not a man, not anything our tongues learn to name in fields and forges. We give such things faces so we can be brave enough to stand before them. Call her Ultima. Call her a seraph. Call her the answer to despair uttered by a universe with no patience left for human pace. The stones are doorways. At Murand, the door stood open, and what waited had found the right vessel at last. You want me to tell you how the battle looked? I can tell you how it felt. Like standing knee-deep in the sea while a storm cuts the horizon into strips and the waves go out, and you know in your bones the one coming back will carry you off like a leaf. We were very small. Our swords were very loud and very small. Spells tore light into pieces, and the pieces bled colors I do not have names for. The Templar who had once been men wore their borrowed power like rusted crowns. The air itself bent toward a shape that would have been a god if we had allowed it the last word. Alma stood like a lantern in a house on fire. Whatever had marked her, whatever had made her fit to carry an old hunger, it had not taught her how to surrender. She is gentle. Gentle is not weak. Gentle is a hand that does not let go. When the thing reached through her to touch our world, she held my name as if it were a rope and would not let herself be pulled the whole way across. We climbed the graveyard where airships sleep. Their bones lie in a stone sea, ribs like cathedrals, keels like mountains. The fight moved there because truth does not stay in crypts. It finds fields where men once dared the sky and breaks there instead. Ultima wore priests and kings like veils and then let them fall. The face behind was not hatred. It was indifference so deep it cannot tell worship from defiance. That is what made it terrible. Do not look for cleverness now. There was none. We bought each heartbeat with all the rest. Cid swung Durandal until the old sword sang itself thin. Agrias burned through the last of her oath and stood on will alone. Mustadio's machines coughed and broke, and he picked up a fallen spear and made of himself a soldier the way men did before brass learned how to spit. Meliadul whispered her brother's name and made it a blade. I did the only thing I have ever done well. I refused. I refused the bargain. I refused the arithmetic. I refused to let the shape of the world be drawn by a hand that does not bleed. Alma refused with me. Between us, the refusal made a place where breath could keep happening. That is all victory ever is. When it tore, it did not scream. It withdrew like a tide, angry without anger, old without age. The stones fell silent. The air grew ordinary in a rush that made me weep. We were alive. That seemed indecent. The graveyard of airships held us up like a palm. What followed is more important than the fight and less beautiful to hear. The church set fire to the truth and warmed itself at the blaze. They declared me dead because it was useful and declared me damned because it was necessary. Delita took the throne as if it had always been built for him. He made treaties with the same hands that had held Ovelia like a vow. He smiled the way I remember from our boyhood when he lied to the steward to get us out of trouble for something I had done. Ovelia saw him. That is the trouble with love and the mercy of it. It sees. She had been moved like a bead on an abacus her whole life. He promised to set the frame down and count no more, and then he counted softer, which feels like tenderness until the day you realize the sum is the same. There are stories of their final hour. I was not in the room. I have heard the knife glinted like an honest answer. I have heard the answer was as quick. I do not know which of them died faster. I only know the last word in that hall was Delita's question to a ghost. Ramza, what did you get? I got this. Olin wrote me down right. He took his father by marriage's legends and my stubborn facts and married them without losing either. For this, a good man died, and his papers were locked away where truth waits when it cannot breathe. Centuries will pass, and have. And a scholar named Araslam will pry the lid enough that air gets in. People will nod wisely in rooms that do not smell of blood and say how sad it all was and how stirring. That is the price of doing a thing for its own sake. You will be misunderstood by those who come after and hated by many of those who stood beside. Alma and I walked out of Ivalice by roads men do not patrol because nothing of value moves on them. We found a valley with soil that takes seed, water that mines its banks, and people who measure worth in bread and laughter. I do not hide because I fear. I hide because I learned at last the difference between saving the world and managing it. I am not fit for the second labor. I mistrust anyone who is. You want conclusions. I can feel the request in the way the fire settles, in the way your shoulders have softened under your cloak. I have few. They are simple, and so are difficult. A man's birth is a suggestion, not a sentence. Believe anyone who tells you otherwise only as long as they are willing to trade places with you. Faith is a blade. Hold it by the hilt, or it will cut you down to the bone and smile while doing it. There is holiness in the world. It is mostly found in bread divided fairly, in water shared without counting, in names remembered properly and said aloud. Power is a liar. It tells you that because you can, you should, and because you did, you were right. I watched Delita prove both halves false and still come away with a crown. He was not wrong about everything. He was wrong about enough. The stones are not gone. Nothing that old disappears. They are quiet because enough of us said no loudly enough in the same place at the same time. If they speak again, it will be because men have made them a chorus by their own cruelties. Do not make that music. Write it down when you can. Speak it when you must. But understand that truth's first duty is to be lived. Oren died to keep a record. I live to keep a garden. Between us lies a reasonable hope that someone will have both. If you ever find yourself at a crossroad with a friend you love on the other path, remember this. You do not have to win the argument to keep faith with what the two of you once were. I could not save Delita from himself. He could not save me from being forgotten. We saved what we could save in the only ways open to us. The world we left behind is neither the world we wanted nor the one we deserved, but it is survivable. That is not a small thing. My father's charge has outlasted my last name. Tolerate no injustice. Stray not from the true path. It sounds simple because it is, and it is hard because it is. When the path forks between what helps people you can see and what pleases an idea you cannot touch, pick the people. Let the idea scowl. It does not bleed when you fail it. If you want a last answer to carry in your pocket, take this. History will always choose the story that keeps the temple standing. Make your peace with that, and then do what is right anyway. If you must be called heretic to keep a promise, accept the name and keep it well. If you must vanish to leave a world fit for children to play in, go and do not look back except to remember the ones who walked with you part of the way. I am no king. I am a man who once refused a crown he was never offered because it came stapled to a lie. I plant beans the way soldiers place tents, straight lines, proper space, attention to drainage. Alma laughs at me and sets the table. Children chase each other past the rows and pull up a plant now and then. I do not scold them. Roots are for learning. The War of the Lions is over because we say so, and we keep saying it with the lives we make in its aftermath. The other war, the old one, between those who build ladders and those who pull them up, goes on. I am tired. Others are not. That is how we go on winning in little ways. The sky has finished deciding itself. Light runs its fingers along the ridgepole of the world. I have told you what I could tell and left out what silence deserves. If you carry any of this away, let it be the habit of looking closer. Lies do their best work in the space between a glance and a stare. Close that space, keep watch, share your fire. And if by chance you meet a scholar in some future library humming over a cracked book with a name that sounds like mine in it, be kind to him. He is doing a hard, necessary thing. Not harder than planting beans, not easier, just necessary. Let me kick these ashes flat and pour a circle of water and stand a moment with the steam on my hands. Then I will go where Alma waits with bread and a cup and the day's simple tasks. You will go where you are going. May your road be less blood and more bread. If it cannot be, may your refusal be steady. If you must be forgotten to do the thing that needs doing, may you be forgotten well. That is all. The fire is out. The truth such as it is will keep without it. The sun has us now. Go,